Have you ever thought about all of the names and the titles that we all have? I'll use myself as an example. Sure, most people call me Matt. I do have a full name, Matthew, Thomas, John, Surico. I have a diaconate vocation, and so many of you know me as Deacon Matt, or more formally, Deacon Surico. Right? Of course, I have a vocation as a husband and a father, so my wife has certain terms of endearment that she has for me, perhaps sometimes less endearing if I've not been such a good husband. And of course, I have children, and so when they were young, they called me Daddy, now they call me Dad. I still have some friends of my children who I still know, and since they've known me for so long as little ones, they still call me Mr. Surico. It's very nice. Of course, I work too, and so my job occupation, you could probably say I'm a computer systems engineer. And in my current position, my current job, I'm a senior database administrator. And so all of these names and titles that I have. You might be wondering, well, which of all of these is my favorite? Which is the one that I'm most strongly connected to, that I really love? It's actually one that I haven't mentioned, but it's one that we all share, pretty much all of us, maybe all of us here today, that we share in common, and that title, that name is Christian. We're all Christians. And you know, I believe it's so important for all of us, myself and all of us here, because being a Christian is really the foundation. It's the underpinning of everything else that we do in our lives, all of our roles, all of our titles. That's who we are, our identity. Deep down inside of us, we're Christians, and we're called to be Christians in the world. A world that, by the way, sometimes isn't so hospitable to Christians, right? Sometimes it's very difficult to be a Christian in this world. So perhaps it would be instructive to take a moment and say, well, what does it mean to be a Christian? What does that word mean? Of course, we have the word Christ, right? So being a Christian is being a believer in Jesus Christ and his identity and who he is. But more than just being a believer, we're followers of Jesus. We are disciples of Jesus. We follow in his footsteps. We try to do as he did and still does for us. So I think this actually is kind of what James was getting at in that beautiful second reading that we heard. It's not just enough to believe in Jesus and have that faith, but to put it into action. What did Jesus do? What does he call us to do? To love. Love is an action word. We're called to love. We're called to love in a very special way, to love all people. You know, this is how we're called as Christians, and that's really hard. All right, so we have an identity. Our identity is rooted in our Christianity. Our Christianity is rooted in the identity of Jesus. Of course, in this beautiful 8th chapter of Mark, Jesus asks his disciples, that includes us, who do you say that I am? Who is Jesus? Well, we can start very simply and say what the people around Jesus and his disciples said. Jesus is a great teacher, a great prophet. Absolutely. He's on par with, has the same honor as those wonderful prophets of the Old Testament. Absolutely true. Got to go a little deeper. And Peter has that great revelation that Jesus is the Christ, in Greek, Christos, which is a translation of the Hebrew Mashiach, Messiah. Jesus is the anointed one. Jesus is the Messiah, the one sent into the world, the only begotten Son of God, born of Mary, but still Son of God, who came into the world to save us. Yeah, now we're getting deeper and deeper into the identity of Jesus. But we can't stop there. And this is where Peter had the difficulty. We have to also understand that Jesus is the fulfillment of Isaiah's prophecy that there would be a suffering servant. Jesus is the leader, the servant, the man of God who washes his disciples' feet and then goes to the cross and dies for us. Servant, a suffering servant, this horrible crucifixion. Can you believe that God loves us so much that he would come into our world to be one of us and suffer and die for us? It's just outstanding, amazing, and just shows us the depths of God's love, how much he wants us to be a part of him. And from that, we understand that there's going to be suffering in life. In fact, we're going to suffer too. Because as Christians, we're called to increase our capacity to love. Not just love a little bit, but to love a whole lot and to keep working at it. All of us have to keep working at increasing our capacity to love, and that's where it gets hard. We talk about carrying our crosses. Some of us feel they're carrying a cross, because it's true, of physical disability, of some emotional situation, some difficult some difficulty that go through in your life, physically, emotionally, yes, these are crosses, absolutely, that we have to bear. But I think Jesus even wants us to go further than that and recognize that sometimes that cross is the cross of increasing our capacity to love amongst those who it's difficult to love. To open up our hearts and be self-giving of ourselves, putting aside our ego, wanting mercy, love, and forgiveness for all people, even the people who we have problems with, even the people who are against us in our faith. This is the worldwide problem that we face, that as Christians we need to increase our capacity to love where it's very difficult. This is a difficult cross to bear. I'm sure it'd be pretty easy for all of us, myself included, to just think for a moment about even just one person in our life that we have that difficulty with, a person who we found it hard to forgive, a person who we just think, well, they're kind of second class, maybe in our family, our group of friends, somebody who's just kind of not quite the same as the rest. It's easy to love the people that we're close to. It's hard to love those who we're a little distant from, And I think we have young people here today. You're kind of not exonerated from this. You're a part of this as well. You're Christians, and school, I think some problems that we see in society, many problems, come from those who are lonely and who have difficulties and problems and who aren't cared for, the outsiders, the lonely ones. And so as students in school, we have to think about that. It's hard to make friends with the person that everybody else says, you're not supposed to be friends with that person. It's hard. It's really hard. Because you're going to take on some of that mockery yourself if you sit with the person who nobody else is supposed to sit with. We're called to do that as adults as well. We're called to open up our hearts and find those difficult moments, those difficult relationships that we have with people that we know, with groups of people that we don't know, and open up our minds and our hearts and be those who truly are wanting mercy, forgiveness, and love for others, even if it causes us pain. So perhaps that's what we can do today, my dear brothers and sisters. Bring to mind today in prayer during the week that one person or persons in our life who do need our love, and we haven't been giving to them. And remember about the fact that we are Christians, rooted in this great identity of Jesus, who suffered and died for us, who shows us the way how to empty ourselves and give to others. So Jesus, isn't just some far-off, distant historical figure. He's present to us, all of us today, especially in the Eucharist. That's why it's great to be here at Mass. We get strengthened and we get fulfilled by Jesus, who calls us to walk that road as Christians, and he's with us. He knows what it's like to suffer. So may we ask for God's help today through his Son, Jesus, to help us on our journey in life to increase our capacity to love as we ponder who Jesus really is. And perhaps we can ask ourselves yet another question. Are we Christians just entitled?